Hey, what's up? It's Mykill Metal, and I'm playing some more Kerbal Space Program. And this time I'm going to send a bunch of probes out to a couple of different places. And this one is heading out towards Duna. I'm going to lose the boosters. And here's the second stage, and the fairings dropping off. Use that to circularize, and then I got this nuclear engine unlocked, so I'm going to use that to burn out towards Duna. It's only a little bit more delta V to get to Duna than it is to get to the moon. I think it's only like 200 or 300 extra meters per second, something like that. Here we go, get nice and close. And then once I leave the sphere of influence, I'm going to use MechJeb to set up a maneuver to burn a little bit closer, and I'm going to use MechJeb because it's a lot more accurate than I am. And it's a little bit more realistic because the computers at NASA do pretty much the same thing. I mean, they do most of the math, but they punch in the numbers, and I'm using this basically as a calculator for me. There we go. And now I'm going to time warp over to Duna. And once I get within the sphere of influence, I'm going to start setting up a maneuver node so that I can burn into the orbit of the contract for the satellite. And once I finish that, I'm going to start heading towards the planet. But for right now, let me get this set up. I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit here and there. Try to get it as close as I physically can. And I get it pretty close. There we go. And I'm going to have the computer do it because the computer is a lot more accurate than I am. There we go. And right here, I notice that it's a little bit farther than the orbit, so I'm going to stop it manually once I see right there. Okay. And now I'm going to set up another maneuver node, and I'm going to try to make it so that I only have to burn once to set up my new orbit. And once I get it to where I like it, I'm going to have the computer do the burn. I'm going to cut out part of the burn because it's a pretty long one. And once I get it in the right spot, I realize that I get the contract. So now that I'm in high orbit, I can do some science and get another contract. There we go. And now it's time to land. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the chutes as soon as the atmosphere gets thick enough, and once it gets even thicker they'll actually pop out and start slowing me down, and then I'll use the engine to try to kill some of the lateral velocity because the parachutes aren't that effective in the atmosphere because it's extremely thin on Duna. There we go. Take a couple screenshots. And nice landing. There we go. Do some science. Get the science for the contract for the landing on Duna and for doing the science on Duna. And now it's time to unlock some more of the tech tree. There we go. Now, I pretty much launched the exact same vehicle because I realized it had pretty much the exact same delta V that I needed. And I got another contract for Duna for setting up a satellite. And this one's on a retrograde orbit, It's going the complete opposite direction. And once I get the contract, I'm going to burn and try to flip the orbit around. And once I do that, I will set it up to encounter Ike. But I need to do a second burn over here so I don't actually hit Duna. There we go. Set that up. Bring that as close as I can. About 30 kilometers off the surface, something like that. I'm going to time warp down here. And do the burn. It's at an odd angle, burning almost straight towards it. There we go. Okay, now once we get in the sphere of influence, I'm going to set up another maneuver node. And this one is going to circularize. There we go, that's good enough. And I got the contract for ending up in orbit of Ike. So now I'm going to do the science in orbit. Get that contract. I'm going to time warp around to the DayZ. And I'll flip the camera around so I can actually see and scout out a landing site. Now I'm going to use some of the fuel that's left in this stage. There we go, that's good enough. And this, technically, probably could actually make it all the way back to Duna, but I'm not going to try that right now. I probably could have done that in one trip, but I could have landed this one on Duna and then, or on here on Ike, and then landed it on Duna with the parachutes. But oh well, that's not how I ended up doing it. So now I'm going to slow it down and try to not crash into the surface. There we go. We get the contract for landing and the contract for the science. And now I'm going to send the exact same rocket out towards Gilly, because it has enough delta V to make it there. So I just cut out the trip because it gets a bit repetitive. So I'm going to set this up. And I almost forgot to do the science in orbit, so I did a little maneuver right there to get the orbit set up. And I'm going to burn straight towards the surface because there's like there's almost no gravity on this thing. It's extremely low. It's ridiculous. I'll show you in a second what I'm talking about. It's crazy. Here we go. And I turned off the SAS stabilization, and I accidentally hit the W key, and I flipped around. And yeah, it has enough just to kind of flip you off the surface of the moon. I don't even know if this is technically... I think technically it's a moon, but it's like a satellite, because it's a weird... I think it's like a captured asteroid or something. It's got a weird eccentric orbit. I don't know. So I'm going to unlock more of this stuff. And I'm going to send out another rocket. And this one is going to be headed out towards Jool. There we go, lose the boosters. And this is the burnout towards Jool. I'm going to use the rest of that stage and then some of the nuclear rocket. And then once I get in orbit, I have to set it up so that I get this satellite in the right orbit, and that requires a hell of a lot of maneuvering and a lot of patience because it took me like 20 minutes to get this set up correctly. Go. And this one is the last burn before the circularization. It's to the orbit. There we go. And this is the last maneuver around Jool for this satellite, at least. So I'm just going to tweak this orbit until it gets as close as I can physically get it to the other orbit, or to the designated orbit. There we go. And I'm going to time warp around and perform the burn. And I think for the next episode, I'm going to launch the space shuttle that I just built, and I'm going to try and build a space station if it doesn't end up falling apart. But for now, I'm going to spend the science that I got, and I'm going to unlock Warp Drive. That's also going to be in the next one. So until then, I'll see you later.
Oh, shit!
Mykill, can you move yet?